we now welcome Amy Holmes, writer for HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, political columnist. She's in New York. Amy, on Monday, President Trump blamed totally ill-prepared governors for the pandemic. He also accused President Barack Obama's administration of leaving bare the federal government's cupboards of stockpiled equipment. Do you agree with that?
Gosh, Larry, there's been so much partisan politicking, to name your show, around the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been so hard to sift through all of the competing claims and facts and information. Here's what I can tell you about New York and living in New York City, that in fact we were very poorly served by our mayor, Mayor de Blasio, and also by our governor, Andrew Cuomo, no matter how much he wants to rewrite history. Early on in the pandemic, we were told it wasn't a big deal. Mayor de Blasio, he actually even led parades down through Chinatown to say that everything's safe, don't be worrying about this panic, stick to your normal routine, stick to your normal day. The subways were cleaned for the first time. I mean, New Yorkers didn't know they hadn't been cleaned all along. And of course, the governor, he doesn't necessarily want to take responsibility for it, but it was his order to make COVID-19 positive patients be admitted in retirement centers. And we know that the pandemic, it just spread like a wildfire. Yes, there was mismanagement at the presidential level as well, and a lot of conflicting information. Should we wear masks? Shouldn't we wear masks? What kind of precautions should we take? I think a lot of that was the fog of war, not really understanding this virus. But I think the federal government and state and local governments share responsibility, and they also share the responsibility for answers and for solutions.
But in the election, do you think if Trump loses, it's largely due to the administration's handling of the pandemic?
I don't know if it will be because of its handling of the pandemic exactly, but certainly because of the lockdowns and the economic impact those have had across the country. I'm sure you know, again, referring back to New York and New York City, it's been devastating for the economy, for employment, for businesses, restaurants, retailers that have gone out of business and will likely never come back. And we know small businesses, for example, employ 75% of the U.S. workforce. So when you have those small businesses going bankrupt, not being able to, keep their doors open because of the lockdown, that has a tremendous, devastating impact on the average American and their ability to keep up with their bills, paying the rent, paying the mortgage. So I think those factors and Americans feeling this economic insecurity and devastation, and that the country is going in the wrong direction, that's what Donald Trump really needs to fear.
What does he have to do the rest of this week to put this convention together and gain back some public respect and responsibility?
Well, I don't know if he's going to gain back public respect, Larry. I think that ship may have sailed a long time ago. But he does need to articulate a message about the Trump agenda for the next 4 years. He can't just, run a negative campaign accusing Joe Biden of being senile, losing his marbles, and all of that. Voters know who Donald Trump is. They knew who he was in 2016, and they certainly know who he is in 2020. What they don't know is what he wants to do with the next 4 years should he be reelected, and he needs to make that clear.
Do you think we're going to have an upheaval on Election Day? People storming at the polls, all kinds of things, closing polls, post office, that we might have a ruckus this year?
Oh, Larry, that's what I fear most, is that we will not have a clear answer election night or the day after or even the day after that. With the mail-in ballots, different states have different deadlines that either it has to be postmarked before election day or arrive before election day. Voters need to know all of those details if they plan to do a mail-in ballot. And we know that over 50% of Biden voters do intend to vote by mail-in. So they need to know their state rules very closely and very carefully. 19% of Trump voters plan to do mail-in. And then, of course, it's counting all those ballots once they do get mailed in. Say that there, that some, in the 2016 election, for example, 1% of mail-in ballots were thrown out. And 23% of those were thrown out because they arrived late. Well, that 1% is the difference was the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton being president of the United States. Donald Trump, he won Michigan by less than 0.3%. Now imagine if 1% of mail-in ballots are thrown out. That could make Michigan an endless lawsuit. I think that's what a lot of Americans are fearing, and I hope it doesn't come to that.
I understand the Republicans are not going to issue a platform, but they're going to continually enthusiastically support the president's first agenda, which is make America great again, again. No platform?
Make America Great Again, again. Not the most felicitous campaign slogan, but you can remember it. No platform. I find that interesting. It seems that it's a concession that Trumpism is not a clear and articulable platform, and it actually conflicts with a lot of conservative principles, like on free trade, for example, where Trump tends to be more protectionist. So this seems to me that Republicans, kind of like Democrats last week, that they're avoiding conflict within the party, conflict between moderates, conservatives, Trump enthusiasts, people who aren't that excited about Trump, and basically letting people go their own way to campaign for their constituency to try to get that vote.
Do you agree if the election were tomorrow, Biden would win? And if you do agree, what does Trump have to do in the next how
Well,
many number of days?
yes, well, looking at the polling data, Biden is ahead in those, all important swing states. Again, I want to make sure our viewers know the national poll is not what matters. As we found out in 2016 and also 2000 when George Bush was elected, it's the electoral map. And you have to look at those electoral votes and, which side of the ledger they fall on. And right now, Biden is up in those swing states. So yes, Larry, if the election were held tomorrow, Biden has the distinct advantage. What Donald Trump needs to do is, again, articulate his agenda, what he plans to do for the American people, for the American voter for the next 4 years. He also needs to have a great ground game. He needs to get out that vote, which during the pandemic, that'll be a challenge. As I mentioned, 19% of Trump voters, they plan to mail in. Well, you got to make sure that they do and remind them and buzz their doorbells and say, have you gone to your mailbox yet? Do you know what your deadlines are? Those logistic GOTV, as they call it, get out the vote efforts are going to be extremely important, particularly this year with coronavirus, threatening a lot of voters and making them nervous about participating.
How important will the debates be?
Larry, I think they could be critical. And I think the Biden team is very well aware of that. That Joe Biden, he's going to need to show that he has focus, stamina, that he can string a sentence together. He has to be more than just not comatose. He has to be in fighting top shape. And it was Terry McAuliffe who said earlier in this election season, this summer, that Biden should stay in the basement. Don't put him out there. Don't wheel him out for, public inspection and just let Trump dig his own hole, dig his own grave, so to speak. Well, the debates won't allow him to do that. And if you remember in the Democratic primary, there were moments when other Democrats in the primary race, they looked at the podium, they looked at Joe Biden and said, "Do you even remember the beginning of the sentence you started?" I think that was Julian Castro who called into question Joe Biden's mental fitness and competency. So Joe Biden is going to need to show that he has what it takes to get through the debates, let alone get through 4 years of being president of the United States.
Will Kamala Harris be a big plus for Biden?
I think Kamala Harris could be a great advocate and spokesperson for Biden, especially in the African American community, where he has made some very embarrassing and damaging flubs. You remember he was on the radio show with Charlemagne the God when he blurted out, "If you don't vote for me, you ain't black." Another interview where he said that African Americans were less diverse than Latino Americans, and you saw, black celebrities, athletes, political leaders pushing back against Biden, saying, "What are you talking about? And you can't talk that way, and you can't take the black vote for granted." And I think that's why you saw the Democratic convention so laser focused on the black vote and trying to, gin up that excitement and electricity and enthusiasm for Joe Biden, because he can't be president. He said it himself. he can't be president without the black vote. And Kamala Harris, I think, could be a very powerful spokesperson, not just because she's African American, but because she's articulate and she can argue these points to reach out to the African American community, and then of course to suburban women, married women with children, and that whole demographic.
And frankly speaking, if Trump is defeated, will the final analysis be it was the COVID-19 that beat him?
You know, Larry, I think the final analysis will be Trump beat himself, and that he did not take the advice that was offered to him over and over and over again, which is to quit with the Twitter, quit with the name calling and the personal attacks, try to branch out, try to bring in more voters. You know, he won 6.7 to 9.2. That's the estimate from Larry Sabato at the University of Virginia. That's the 6.2 to 9.6.7 rather to 9.2 million Obama voters in 2016. People who had voted for Obama in 2012 and flipped, crossed the aisle, went to the dark side, use whatever metaphor you want, to vote for Donald Trump and to take a chance on Donald Trump. And the last 4 years, I think even Donald Trump would have to admit, have been a roller coaster, have been chaotic, and frankly, oftentimes exhausting. And Donald Trump had many opportunities to temper some of this behavior, to have more discipline and more focus. But Donald Trump believes he's his own best advisor and doesn't appear to want to listen to anybody.
Thanks for your time today, Amy. Always good seeing you.
Thank you, Larry. A pleasure and an honor.